Hello. I'd like to share a story with you. My husband moved his parents in with us, telling me he was leaving for a 4-year work assignment in Germany. I saw him off at the airport, and then I blocked his 6 platinum credit cards and filed for divorce, throwing his family into a state of shock. I had just tearfully said goodbye to my husband, David, who was supposedly heading to Germany for 4 years for the sake of our future. I stood frozen in the airport parking garage after receiving a text alert. A charge of $25,000 had just been made on his credit card for a purchase at Saks Fifth Avenue's jewelry department. It turned out his Germany was a 6-star resort in Miami Beach, and the $300,000 my husband and I had painstakingly earned was flying away with his young mistress. He left me with only 2 things. First, a boundless betrayal. And second, his 2 freeloading in-laws, who now expected me to serve them like a hired maid. A sudden summer thunderstorm in New York City had made the air in our Upper East Side apartment humid and cool. I stood by the window, watching raindrops lash against the tempered glass, a vague, indescribable anxiety growing inside me. Behind me, the loud laughter of my in-laws and husband echoed, shattering the usual tranquility of our home. Today was a special day. According to my husband, David, he had personally driven to their small town in rural Pennsylvania to bring his parents to the city. George and Patricia arrived with a car full of country offerings, from a bushel of apples and jars of homemade preserves to dozens of carefully packed farm-fresh eggs. On the surface, it looked like an idyllic family reunion. But my woman's intuition, honed over 7 years of marriage to David, told me something was off in his darting, evasive eyes. Dinner was more elaborate than usual. I had left work early to make pot roast and his favorite mushroom gravy with mashed potatoes, a meal his parents adored. David sat at the head of the table, pouring his father a glass of bourbon with an overly cheerful expression. He cleared his throat, setting his glass down with a thud to get everyone's attention. David looked at me, then at his parents, and announced in a solemn tone, "Mom, Dad, Elena, I brought you all here today to share some important news. The company has decided to send a key employee to Germany for an advanced management program. I'll be heading up the Frankfurt branch for 4 years. This is a golden opportunity for me. When I return, I'll be in line for the senior vice president position. The board entrusted this mission to me, and I accepted." I froze. My fork nearly slipped from my hand. 4 years, that's an eternity. And he hadn't said a single word to me about it. I looked at him, trying to keep my voice as calm as possible. "You're going to Germany for 4 years. Why didn't you tell me about such a huge decision sooner?" David quickly took my hand. His eyes were filled with a look of guilt, but I could still see the insincerity behind it. "Elena, honey, I'm so sorry. It all happened so fast. The CEO called me in, made the offer, and I had to accept on the spot or the opportunity would have gone to someone else. I'm doing this for our family's future. When I come back, we can give you and our future kids the best life. Buy a big house in the suburbs, instead of being cooped up in this apartment." Hearing her son was going abroad, Patricia lit up, a wide smile spreading across her face. She clapped her hands on her thighs and exclaimed, her voice rising above the storm outside, "Oh my Lord, what incredible luck. 7 generations of our family have dreamed of something like this. Our David is such a success. He's going to Germany, to Europe. George, do you hear that? This is an honor for our whole family. You go, son, don't you worry about a thing. Elena will take care of everything here at home." George nodded in agreement, raised his glass, and took a satisfied sip. "A man's got to see the world. You're doing the right thing, son. Your mother and I support you completely." David turned to me, squeezing my hand gently as if trying to reassure me, but his palm was cold as ice. He continued laying out what he called his flawless plan. "Elena, I'm going far away, and I can't leave you here all alone, and I certainly can't leave my elderly parents out in the country without anyone to look after them. So, I've thought of everything. For the 4 years I'm gone, my parents will stay here and live with you. It'll be more cheerful for them, and they can help you with the cooking. And you, in turn, can look after their health, fulfilling my duty as a son for me. You're such a caring and understanding wife. You won't let me down, will you?" David's words were like an invisible noose tightening around my neck. He had presented me with a done deal. If I refused, I'd be the selfish, petty daughter-in-law who was holding back her husband's career and refused to care for his parents. But if I agreed, I faced the prospect of living under the same roof as my mother-in-law, a woman known for her difficult and critical nature, while my husband was worlds away. I glanced at Patricia and saw her watching me with a challenging stare. I took a deep breath, trying to suppress the irritation rising in my chest. I won't stand in the way of your career, David. But I think we need to discuss your parents staying here for 4 years. They're used to the open space of the country. This apartment is cramped. I'm afraid they won't be comfortable, and it might even affect their health. Besides, I'm at work all day. I'm worried I won't be able to give them the attention they deserve. Patricia's face immediately darkened. She slammed her plate on the table. Elena, what are you trying to say? Do you think we're a couple of dirty country bumpkins? Or are you afraid we'll be a burden on you? My son works his fingers to the bone to pay for this home. And now, when he's leaving and asks you to look after his parents, you're already turning up your nose. And you call yourself a good wife and daughter-in-law. David hastily intervened, his voice sweet and placating, but his gaze was pressuring. Mom, come on. That's not what Elena meant. My wife is just worried you won't be comfortable. Elena, honey, they're getting older. They're healthy today, but who knows about tomorrow? I can't work peacefully knowing they're all alone in the country while I'm so far away. If you love me, you'll help me with this. Think of it as helping me carry this family burden so I can focus on building my career. I promise, I'll send you my entire salary from over there. Buy whatever you want, spend it on whatever you like. Hearing the part about money and responsibility, I knew I couldn't refuse right there in front of his parents. I had to nod reluctantly, feeling a heavy weight settle on my heart. All right. Since you've already decided and your parents want to stay, I agree. I just ask you to be patient with me if I do something wrong. David breathed a sigh of relief, poured his father more bourbon, and began painting a picture of their brilliant future, a villa by a lake, trips around Europe for the whole family. The laughter returned, but I just sat there, chewing on my food, which now tasted bitter. I looked at David, the man I had shared a bed with for so many years, and suddenly felt like he was a complete stranger. Why was he in such a hurry to leave? Why couldn't he look me straight in the eye when he talked about the trip? My intuition screamed that something was wrong with this perfect picture, but I couldn't figure out what it was. The dinner ended. I was in the kitchen cleaning up, the loud blare of the TV and my mother-in-law's booming laughter filling the apartment from the living room. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw David step out onto the balcony to take a call. He spoke in a hushed, furtive voice, covering his mouth with his hand. I wanted to approach, but he had already finished the call and returned to the room, a practiced smile on his face. That night, David slept soundly, but I tossed and turned, listening to the monotonous rhythm of the rain and my husband's snores, my mind swirling with questions that had no answers. The next morning, the apartment was filled with an air of farewell, but strangely, David was the most sentimental one, not me. He woke up very early, checked his suitcase one last time, and put on an elegant suit. His parents were up before dawn to make a huge breakfast, insisting David eat enough to have strength for the long journey. Patricia clung to her son's hand with tears in her eyes, giving him an endless stream of advice, from how to eat properly and dress for the weather to warning him about strangers in a foreign country. Elena, will you drive me to the airport? Of course. Your flight is at 10 a.m. We should probably get going. David glanced at his watch, hurrying me along. I silently grabbed my purse and car keys. On the way to JFK, David held my hand nonstop, whispering the most tender words. It's going to be hard for you at home, sweetheart. I'll video call you as soon as I land. Please, take care of yourself. Don't overwork. And if my parents are unhappy about something, just be the bigger person. Do it for me, okay? Okay, I mumbled, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. I didn't feel sadness about my husband leaving, just an emptiness and exhaustion. The car stopped at the International Departures Terminal. David gave me a tight hug, a loud kiss on the forehead, then grabbed his suitcase and walked inside, not forgetting to turn around and wave with a radiant smile. I stood and watched his back disappear through the automatic doors. I was supposed to be crying, or at least feel a pang in my heart. But no, all I felt was a sense of relief, as if a heavy weight had been lifted. At the same time, yesterday's anxiety returned with a vengeance. Back in the car, I started the engine, ready to head to the office. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my purse. I glanced at the screen, a notification from my bank, probably the annual fee or some promotional junk. I was about to ignore it, but a professional habit made me pick up the phone. The words on the screen made me slam on the brakes and pull over to the side of the road. My heart began to pound, as if it were trying to escape my chest. A transaction for $25,000 has been completed from an authorized user card linked to your account at Saks Fifth Avenue. I rubbed my eyes and reread the message 5 times. $25,000, a huge sum, and the location, Saks, an elite department store in the heart of Manhattan. My head started spinning. I had gotten that authorized user card for David for business expenses and emergencies. He was supposedly checking in for a flight to Germany. So, why was a charge for jewelry being made on his card in Midtown Manhattan at that very moment? There were 2 possibilities. First, his card was stolen or compromised. Second, he wasn't at the airport at all. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. My experience in high-stress work environments had taught me not to panic. I dialed the bank's fraud department. My voice was cold and resolute, without a single tremor. "Hello. I am the primary account holder for card number. I just received a notification for a large transaction that I suspect is fraudulent. I demand an immediate freeze on all cards associated with this account, including the primary and all authorized user cards." The operator confirmed my information and executed the request immediately. After hanging up, I sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. If the card had been stolen, David would have called me right away. But my phone was silent. I tried calling him. "The subscriber you have dialed is not available." He had turned his phone off, which was consistent with boarding a plane. But what about that transaction? No thief would be so brazen as to walk into a luxury department store and spend $25,000 on jewelry. There were cameras everywhere. A terrible thought ignited in my mind. David had lied. He wasn't flying to Germany. He was in New York City, and he had spent that money on diamonds for someone else. I remembered his shifty eyes the night before, the secret phone call on the balcony, his haste this morning. All the pieces of the puzzle started to click into one horrifying picture. I didn't go to the office. I turned the car around and headed downtown. I needed to confirm the truth. But on the way, I realized I couldn't just walk into Saks and demand to see their security footage. They wouldn't release it to a private citizen. I parked near a quiet cafe and ordered a black coffee. No sugar. The bitterness helped clear my head. I opened my banking app and checked the transaction history. Besides that massive charge, I found several smaller purchases over the last week at restaurants and women's clothing stores I had never been to. A woman's intuition is never wrong. I had been deceived. A grand, cruel deception. My husband, the man I shared my life with, had staged a perfect performance to fool me. He had left his elderly parents in my care, while he was off somewhere enjoying himself with our hard-earned money. Tears streamed down my face, hot and salty, but I quickly wiped them away. Crying was pointless now. I needed proof. I needed to know exactly where David was and what he was doing. I thought of Alex, my best friend from college who now worked in cybersecurity and had extensive connections. I dialed his number. "Alex, it's Elena. I need your help with something urgent. I need to track the location and movements of a person. It's a matter of life and death for me." On the other end, Alex could tell from my voice how serious the situation was and agreed immediately. I hung up, staring at the bustling city outside. Yesterday's rain was over. The sun was out, but in my soul, a storm was just beginning. I would not let this go. If David dared to betray me, he would pay dearly for it. I returned home after dark. The apartment was devoid of its morning laughter. Instead, a oppressive atmosphere hung in the air. As soon as I walked in, I was met with incredible chaos. Sunflower seed shells were scattered all over the living room floor, empty glasses littered the coffee table, and the TV was blaring some comedy special at full volume. My father-in-law was asleep on the sofa, his feet propped up on the armrest, snoring loudly, while my mother-in-law was rummaging through the refrigerator. Seeing me, Patricia didn't ask if I was tired from work. She slammed the refrigerator door shut and said reproachfully, "And where have you been? Your father and I are starving over here. Dinner isn't ready." "What? Did you decide to starve us old folks to death?" I glanced at the clock. It was only 6:30 p.m., the time I usually finished work. Suppressing my irritation, I set my bag down and answered calmly. "I just got home from work, Patricia. There are groceries in the fridge. You could have started some rice." Patricia's eyes flashed. She put her hands on her hips and marched over to me. "Oh, so you've gotten smart now, have you? Your husband is barely out the door, and you're already showing your true colors. I'm your mother-in-law. I came here to relax and enjoy the fruits of my son's labor, not to be your servant. My son works hard to provide for this home, and all you have to do is take care of his parents, and even that's too much for you." I looked her straight in the eye, unflinching. I used to tolerate this for the sake of peace in the family, out of respect for David. But now, knowing he had deceived me, my respect for this family had vanished. "You're right, Patricia. I also work and earn money, and half of this apartment was purchased with my funds. I'm not asking you to be a servant, but I am not a maid either." Patricia's jaw dropped, clearly not expecting such a retort from me. She was about to start screaming, but I held up a hand to stop her. "I'm tired and I don't want to argue. But since we're going to be living together for a long time, I think we need to establish some rules to avoid conflict." I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, drank it in one gulp, and returned to the living room, where my father-in-law had woken up and was looking on in confusion. I spoke clearly. "First, food. I work all day and can only cook dinner. Breakfast and lunch are your responsibility. I will buy the groceries and leave them in the fridge. Whoever eats, cleans up after themselves. Dishes are to be washed immediately, not left to pile up in the sink," Patricia shrieked. "How dare you?" I cut her off and continued. "Second, cleanliness. We have hardwood floors. Walk carefully, and don't throw trash on the floor. Everyone cleans their own room. And you are not to enter my bedroom without my permission." I emphasized each word. And finally, third, respect for personal space. I come home from work exhausted, and I need to rest. I ask you to speak more quietly and turn down the TV volume after 10 p.m. Patricia's face turned crimson. She spun towards George and screamed, "Do you see this? Do you see how your daughter-in-law is walking all over us? David wasn't even gone a day before his wife started trying to kick his parents out. Oh, Lord, what did I do to deserve this?" George frowned, his voice dropping to a low, authoritative tone. "Elena, you should be ashamed of yourself. We are your elders. You are the younger one. You must respect us. Who do you think you are, setting conditions for us? This home belongs to my son, and we will live here as we please." I laughed bitterly. "Dad, the deed to this apartment is in both of our names. My parents provided the down payment. David and I took out a mortgage for the rest. David is gone. I am the mistress of this house. I just want everyone to live by the rules so that I have the strength to work and pay the mortgage. If you find this uncomfortable, you are always free to return to Pennsylvania. It's much more spacious there." My words were like a bucket of cold water. They knew perfectly well that their house in the country had no air conditioning or the comforts of this apartment. Patricia fell silent, but her eyes were filled with hatred. "Fine, just you wait. I'm going to call David. We'll see how he handles his disobedient wife." She grabbed her phone and frantically started dialing David's number. But of course, all she got was a long ring or a message that the subscriber was unavailable. I watched her futile attempts to reach him and smirked inwardly. "Your son is busy entertaining his mistress right now. He has no time for your complaints." That evening, I didn't cook dinner. I went to my room and locked the door. From outside, I could hear Patricia's shrieks and the clatter of dishes. I put on my headphones, turned on some instrumental music, and tried to shut out the chaos. I needed to conserve my energy. This war had just begun, and I had to be the victor. On my first night without my husband, I didn't feel lonely. I felt stronger than ever. I told myself, "Elena, You cannot be weak. You must protect yourself and what is yours. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, meticulously applied my makeup, and chose an elegant navy blue suit, adding the blazer to look more formidable. As I left my room, I ignored the venomous glare from my mother-in-law, who was munching on toast at the table, and headed for the door. Today, I wasn't going to the office. I was going to meet with my lawyer, Michael Sterling. Michael's office was on the 11th floor of a quiet office building. He was an old acquaintance, known for his sharp mind and dedication. I placed a folder with the bank statements I had printed that morning on his desk. Michael, please take a look at this. Is there any way to trace this money? Michael adjusted his glasses, took the folder, and began to study the documents carefully. The office was silent, broken only by the rustle of paper. After 15 minutes, he looked up, his face serious. Elena, the situation is more complicated than you think. My people have looked into these transactions. Over the last 6 months, your husband has transferred a total of $300,000 in small increments to an account belonging to a one Tiffany Morgan. $300,000. The words hit me like a thunderclap. My ears started to ring. That was our entire savings from 7 years of marriage, plus the returns from investments I had so carefully managed. We had agreed to use that money to buy a house at the end of the year. And now, Tiffany Morgan. The name sounded familiar. I racked my brain. Of course, Tiffany, the former intern at David's company from 2 years ago. I'd met her once at a company party. A young woman with a syrupy, sweet Southern accent and dewy eyes that always seemed on the verge of tears. Back then, she had hovered around David, calling him Mr. Miller with breathless reverence. I had even complimented her on her politeness, never suspecting I was warming a snake in my own home. Michael continued his analysis, his voice calm, but every word stabbed at my heart. The transfers were very clever. $10,000 here, $25,000 there. The memo line always said payment for goods or materials procurement. If you don't look at the big picture, it's hard to notice anything amiss. This Tiffany is 24 years old, originally from Florida. She has no official employment, but 2 months ago, a luxury condo in Miami was purchased in her name. I clenched my fists so hard, my nails dug into my palms. David had been planning this for a long time. He was siphoning our joint assets to build a love nest with his mistress. $300,000. That was my sweat, my tears, my sleepless nights at work. It was all the times I had denied myself small luxuries, and he just took it and gave it all to another woman. What do I do now, Michael? I can't just lose that money. He looked at me with sympathy. Right now, you need to stay calm. We have proof of the fund transfers, but to get it back, we need to prove it was community property and that the transfers were made without your consent with the intent to conceal assets. I will help you file for divorce and a petition for a temporary restraining order to freeze his assets. But first, you need to determine exactly where David is right now. I nodded, a fire of hatred burning in my eyes. I'll find him. Thank you. Leaving the lawyer's office, I got into my car, a lump forming in my throat. I watched the stream of people on the street, each hurrying about their business. How many other women like me were out there, deceived? I remembered David's sweet words. I do everything for our family. I love you more than anyone. It turned out they were just empty phrases. I opened my phone and looked at our wedding photo, my screen's wallpaper. In the picture, David was beaming, holding my hand tightly. Looking at it now, I felt nothing but disgust. I changed the wallpaper to a plain black screen. As of today, David was dead to me. All that was left was an enemy named David Miller. I drove to his company. I needed to speak with his boss. It was time for the curtain to fall on the performance titled Business Trip to Germany. I wanted to see what would be left of David when his mask was torn off. David's office was in a modern glass skyscraper. I entered the lobby and took a deep breath to compose myself. I wasn't there to make a scene. I was there as a concerned wife, worried about her husband's well-being, the perfect cover for exposing a lie. The receptionist recognized me and smiled. Hello, Elena. Are you here for Mr. Miller? But he's on vacation. I smiled back, polite and composed. I know. I'm here to see his director, Anna Vance, About a personal matter. I have an appointment. I was lying. I had no appointment. But as the wife of a department head, I was confident Anna would spare me a few minutes. I went up to the director's office and knocked. Hearing a come-in, I pushed the door open. Anna, bent over some documents, looked up in surprise and took off her glasses when she saw me. "Oh, Elena, it's you. To what do I owe the pleasure? Did something happen?" "Sit down. Have some water." I sat across from her, my hands folded in my lap, trying to look as naive as possible. "Hello, Anna. I'm sorry for the sudden visit. The thing is, my husband David was in such a rush to get to Germany yesterday that in all the chaos, I forgot to ask him for his exact address there. I need to send him some medication. He left so hastily, and I guess he hasn't bought a new phone yet. I can't reach him. I came to you to ask for the contact information for the branch in Germany." Anna stared at me, her eyes widening in astonishment. She frowned and asked, as if she couldn't believe her ears. "What Germany? You're saying David went to Germany?" Now it was my turn to feign surprise. "Yes, he said the company was sending him for a promotion and to manage the Frankfurt branch for 4 years. He flew out yesterday morning at 10 a.m. Anna laughed, but there was a note of confusion and seriousness in her laugh. "Elena, are you sure you're not mistaken? Our company doesn't have a branch in Germany, and even if there was some project, it wouldn't be David going. He just submitted a request for a 2-week vacation yesterday. On the form, he stated that his wife was seriously ill and he needed to be home to care for her before taking her for treatment in Singapore." I froze as if a bucket of ice water had been dumped on me. His wife was seriously ill. He had dared to use my health, my life, as a cover for his little getaway. He had cursed me just to get vacation time to run off with his mistress. Rage boiled inside me, but I controlled it, managing to project only shock and immense grief. In a trembling voice, I said, Are you serious?" He said his wife was sick, "But I'm perfectly healthy. I go to work every day." Why would he say that? Anna was a perceptive woman. Seeing my reaction and the inconsistencies in David's stories, she began to understand what was happening. She stood up, walked around her desk, and gently patted me on the shoulder. "Elena, calm down. I am officially telling you, there was no decision to send David on a business trip to Germany. The fact that he lied to you and to the company is a serious breach of professional ethics. Are you sure he flew out?" I nodded, tears streaming down my face. This time, they were real tears of humiliation. I drove him to the airport myself. But this morning, I discovered that his credit card was used to buy jewelry here in Manhattan. Anna, I've been deceived. He deceived me. He deceived his elderly parents. Anna sighed and shook her head. What a scoundrel. I never would have expected such a low blow from him. Don't worry. I will have his work and all his expense reports audited before his duties are reassigned. If he dared to defraud the company as well, I won't let it slide. As for your family matters, handle them calmly. If you need any help with documents, just ask. I whispered my thanks and said goodbye. Leaving the director's office, I saw the sky over Manhattan had turned a gloomy gray. Everything was crystal clear. There was no business trip, no bright future. Only a despicable husband, a professional liar, who was spending my money to build castles in the air with another woman. David had burned all the bridges himself. He thought I was a stupid housewife who only knew how to nod and agree. He was wrong. When a woman is backed into a corner, her retaliation is stronger than any storm. I took out my phone and called my lawyer. "Michael, let's begin. I want everything frozen. I want him to be left without a single penny to his name. Let's see how long his true love with that girl lasts then." I walked away. The sound of my heels clicking on the marble floor was cold and determined. The game was just beginning. The next morning, I arrived at the office in a completely different state of mind. Before, my thoughts were constantly occupied with what to cook for dinner, whether my husband would like it, whether my in-laws would be offended. Now, all my thoughts were focused on a single goal: my work and my plan for revenge. I wore a sophisticated white suit, applied a bolder shade of lipstick, and walked into the conference room with the air of a general. Today, I had a crucial meeting with international partners to finalize the contract for the next quarter, a project I had poured my heart and soul into. The meeting was intense. I was at the whiteboard, analyzing market strategy, when my phone on the table began to vibrate incessantly. I glanced at the screen. My mother-in-law. I declined the call, turned the phone face down, and continued my presentation. But a minute later, the phone buzzed again and again. Patricia called 5 times in a row. My partners looked at me sympathetically. I smiled, apologized, and asked for a moment to step outside and take the call, feigning concern that something urgent might have happened at home. The moment I answered, my mother-in-law's hysterical shriek blasted into my ear, echoing down the empty corridor. "Elena! Elena! You have to come home right now. It's your father. He's dying." He collapsed. "He's foaming at the mouth. Get here quick. Take him to the hospital." I'm an old, weak woman. How am I supposed to lift him? Patricia's voice was shrill, seemingly panicked, but I could still detect a note of exaggeration. If George were truly as sick as she described, the first thing one would do is call 911, not their daughter-in-law who was at work halfway across the city. I calmly and coldly asked, "What's wrong with Dad, Patricia? Where is he?" Patricia shrieked even louder. "He's on the floor. His blood pressure must have shot up. Are you that heartless? Your husband is gone. You're supposed to take his place, to care for his parents. Get home this instant." I looked at my watch. From my office to my apartment was a 4-5-minute drive at best, without traffic. During rush hour, it would be over an hour. If my father-in-law had actually had a stroke, he'd be long gone by the time I arrived. But I remembered that just this morning, before I left, George was sitting at the table, sipping tea and eating 2 large bowls of oatmeal. He looked ruddy and healthy. Furthermore, the bottle of blood pressure medication I had bought for him was untouched. He never forgot to take his pill in the morning. I knew immediately what was going on. This was another one of their tricks to summon me home to be their errand girl. Or perhaps Patricia just wanted to disrupt my work, to assert her power to prove that, at her call, I would come running. She wanted me to abandon an important meeting and race home, only to find her husband groaning and demanding chicken soup. I took a deep breath and decided not to fall for it. I spoke clearly into the phone. "Patricia, listen to me calmly. I am in a very important meeting with the CEO right now. I cannot leave for a single minute. If I leave now, I will lose my job, and with it, the money we all live on." Patricia was about to erupt into a stream of curses, but I cut her off. "Don't worry, I'll handle it. I am calling 911 right now. They will send a paramedic unit directly to our apartment. They are professionals. They have oxygen, a stretcher. They will provide first aid and get Dad to Mount Sinai quickly. You just stay home and wait for them." With that, I hung up, not giving her a chance to respond. I immediately dialed 911, gave the address, and described the patient's condition as my mother-in-law had relayed it, making sure to emphasize all the dangerous symptoms so they would arrive quickly. Then I returned to the conference room, smiled, apologized for the interruption, and brilliantly concluded my presentation. About 20 minutes later, my phone vibrated again. This time, it was an unknown number, likely the paramedics. I stepped out again. "Hello, are you a relative of the patient, George Miller? This is EMS. We've arrived at the address provided, but no one is answering the door." We called the apartment's landline. Someone picked up, said we had the wrong number, and hung up. I smirked to myself, just as I thought. A performance. Seeing the ambulance with its flashing lights outside the building, Patricia must have panicked, too afraid to open the door and have her deception exposed, or to have to pay for a false alarm. I responded to the paramedic with feigned alarm in my voice. "Oh, the poor woman. My mother-in-law must be so distraught she's all confused. Doctor, please, knock louder. Tell them that I, the daughter-in-law, called you. If they don't open up, ask the doorman to help you get the door open. What if he's dying in there?" I knew my mother-in-law perfectly. More than anything, she was terrified of losing face in front of the neighbors and spending unnecessary money. And indeed, 5 minutes later, Patricia called me back. Her voice was quiet and meek, all of her previous aggression gone. "Elena dear, we don't need an ambulance. Your father is feeling better now. His blood sugar just dropped a little. I gave him a glass of sweet tea, and he came right around. Tell them to leave. They're making a scene. The neighbors will talk. I answered coldly. How can that be, Patricia? You just said he was foaming at the mouth and collapsed on the floor. You don't play games with an elderly person's health. I've already paid for the emergency call and the services. The paramedics are there. Let them examine him, just for our peace of mind. If something were to happen to Dad, I would never forgive myself. I flatly refused to cancel the call. In the end, Patricia had to open the door and let in the paramedics, who, in the presence of the doorman and a few curious neighbors, took George's blood pressure and pulse. The result? He was perfectly healthy. His vitals were normal, like those of a much younger man. The paramedics scolded them for the false alarm and wasting resources. Patricia had to swallow her pride and reluctantly pay the fee for the service. That evening, when I returned from work, a deathly silence filled the apartment. George was glumly watching TV. Patricia, upon seeing me, just shot me a hateful glare, but didn't dare to yell or argue as before. She understood that I was no longer the submissive daughter-in-law who would dance to her tune. I had used her own over-the-top drama to teach her a lesson in honesty. I went to my room, changed, then came out to the kitchen and made myself some instant noodles. I didn't ask about my father-in-law's health. I already knew he was healthier than I was. My cold demeanor was a silent declaration of war. No more manipulations using fake illnesses. From this day on, in this house, everything would be by my rules. On the third day after David's departure, I met Alex at our favorite cafe in the West Village. Alex had arrived early and was sitting in a quiet corner with a serious expression. He had been my best friend since college and was the only person I could trust right now. Working in cybersecurity, he had a knack for finding information on social media and in databases inaccessible to ordinary people. As soon as I sat down, Alex silently slid a tablet towards me. On the screen was a clear, zoomed-in photograph. A buddy of mine happened to take this yesterday morning at the Miami airport. He saw this couple getting a little too cozy, and the guy's face looked familiar, so he snapped a picture just in case. Take a close look. Holding my breath, I stared at the photo. There was no mistaking it. The man in the picture, wearing a bright Hawaiian shirt, white shorts, and a fedora, was David, my husband. He looked nothing like a businessman on a work assignment in Germany. Beside him stood a young woman in a seductive, backless dress. She was pressed against his shoulder, smiling broadly. It was Tiffany, the former intern. They were standing at the reception desk of an elite, 6-star resort in Miami Beach. David's arm was wrapped tightly around her waist, and her hand rested possessively on his chest. But it wasn't their embrace that made my blood boil. It was the glittering object on Tiffany's left wrist. I zoomed in as far as I could. On her slender white wrist was a Rolex Day-Date, its mother-of-pearl dial encrusted with diamonds. I remembered how, a month ago, David had come home boasting about a huge bonus he'd received for a project. He said he wanted to buy himself a nice watch to look more respectable in meetings with partners. I had believed him then. I was even happy for him. It turned out he had used our joint funds to buy a matching set. He wore one himself, and the other a women's Rolex, the very one I had dreamed of but felt was too extravagant, was now gracing the arm of his mistress. My vision blurred with rage. The feeling of betrayal and humiliation was overwhelming. David wasn't just cheating. He was giving all the best, most valuable things from our family to another woman. Alex looked at me with concern. Elena, are you okay? I found something else. They booked a Seaview villa at the Emerald Shore Resort for 7 days. The rate is $5,000 a night. The reservation is under the name David Miller. $5,000 a night. 7 nights, that's $35,000, plus business class tickets, food, gifts. This trip cost almost $50,000. And at home, my mother-in-law would haggle with me over every bunch of parsley. David constantly complained about difficulties at the company, about his bonuses being cut, so he could give me less money for household expenses. But on his mistress, he threw money around like it was nothing. I wiped my tears and looked at Alex with a determined gaze. I'm fine. Thank you so much, Alex. This photo and the reservation info are golden evidence for the court. Alex nodded. I've saved all the data, including her Instagram post with the geotag. She posted it for close friends, but I was able to get it. She's bragging that her future husband is treating her to an early honeymoon. Future husband? Honeymoon? The words were like salt in an open wound. What had David promised her? That he would come back and divorce his old wife to marry her? That I was just a stupid maid watching the house while he had his fun? I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms, just to stay sane. Fine, David. You want to play the role of a rich man at a resort? I'll show you what a fake rich man looks like. You're in paradise now, but I'm about to send you straight to hell. I turned to Alex. Help me with one more thing. Keep a close eye on all their social media activity. I'm on my way to Michael Sterling's office. It's time to turn off the tap. I stood up and straightened my clothes. The initial pain had transformed into strength. I was no longer the soft, submissive wife. I was Elena, a talented marketing director, and I would use my cold calculation to get justice. That photograph would be David's one-way ticket out of my life, with empty hands. At Michael Sterling's office, it was busy, but he still gave my case top priority. I laid out all the new evidence Alex and I had gathered on his desk. The photo from Miami, the resort reservation details, and the statement showing the purchase of the Rolex at Saks right before his flight. The lawyer examined each document carefully and nodded with satisfaction. Excellent, Elena. With this evidence, we have every reason to ask the court for a temporary restraining order on his assets. David's actions clearly indicate an attempt to conceal marital property. The transfer of $300,000 to Tiffany, and these lavish expenditures under the pretext of a business trip, these are solid legal grounds. I sat across from him, my back straight, my voice steady. Michael, I want to file for divorce, unilaterally, today. And I want the court to freeze all bank accounts in David Miller's name, including his salary and brokerage accounts. And I want a hold placed on the title of his Mercedes so he can't sell it. Michael looked at me with a mix of sympathy and respect. Elena, have you thought this through? Once the petition is filed and the assets are frozen, there's no going back. Your marriage will effectively be over, even if the legal process takes time. I gave a bitter smile. Going back? He cut off all paths back the moment he boarded that plane to Miami with her. I have nothing to regret. I only regret the effort I invested in this sham of a family. Please, do everything as quickly as possible. I want his cards to be nothing but useless pieces of plastic by this evening or tomorrow morning at the latest. The lawyer nodded and immediately summoned his paralegal to draft the documents. I sat and watched as the lines appeared on the computer screen. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Motion for temporary restraining order. Cold legal phrases that were now my weapons. We worked for 3 hours straight to finalize everything. I signed the petition with a firm, decisive hand. My signature had never looked so beautiful and free. It was the signature of my liberation. Then, Michael and I drove to the county courthouse to file the papers. Thanks to the meticulous preparation, the urgency of the matter, and the high risk of asset concealment, the judge accepted the case for expedited review. I paid the required bond for the asset freeze without hesitation from my personal savings. By the end of the day, the court's order was issued. A document with an official seal, directing all relevant banks to freeze the accounts of David Miller. Another copy was sent to the DMV to place a lien on his Mercedes. Holding that order in my hands, I felt a mountain fall from my shoulders. The financial pipeline was cut off. David could no longer siphon a single cent of our joint property to please his mistress. I walked out of the courthouse. The evening sun cast a warm glow on the steps. I called Alex. It's done. The net has been cast. Now we just wait for the fish to bite. On the other end of the line, Alex laughed joyfully. Excellent. I bet there's going to be a storm in Miami tonight. You go get some rest. You'll need your strength to deal with the 2 old folks at home. At the mention of my in-laws, I winced, but I wasn't afraid of them anymore. I held all the cards. The apartment where I lived was legally in both our names, but the down payment was a gift from my parents. I would not let them lord over my territory any longer. I drove home feeling like a victor. David, You thought you were the cleverest one. Thought you could pull the wool over my eyes and enjoy life? You were wrong. When a woman runs out of love, she becomes more ruthless than any man. Enjoy your last fancy dinner tonight, because tomorrow you will be, in the most literal sense of the word, broke. I arrived home when it was already completely dark. As soon as I walked in, I was hit by the strong smell of takeout food. The living room looked like a battlefield. Empty beer cans and gnawed chicken bones were left right on the coffee table. The TV was blasting club music. George was sitting on the sofa with his feet up, smoking a cigarette, ash falling directly onto my expensive hardwood floor. Patricia was sprawled on the other sofa, staring at her phone and cackling loudly. Seeing me, they didn't even say hello or bother to clean up their mess. Patricia sized me up and sneered. "Oh, look who's here, the CEO herself. Didn't even cook dinner. Decided to starve your husband's parents. We had to order a rotisserie chicken. Wasted so much money." I said nothing. I silently walked over, turned off the TV, and then snatched the cigarette from George's hand and extinguished it in an ashtray. My decisive actions stunned them. "What do you think you're doing, you rude brat?" George roared, his face turning purple. I stood in the middle of the room and looked at them with a gaze as cold as a blade. "I'm sorry, Dad, but there is no smoking inside this house. I mentioned that on the first day, and today, I have an important message for you." I took a sheet of paper out of my bag and threw it forcefully onto the table next to the chicken bones. It was a formal notice, drafted by Michael Sterling, but which I had rewritten in simpler language. "This is a notice to vacate. I am demanding that you pack your things and leave this apartment within 3 days." The air froze. Patricia's mouth fell open, her eyes bulging. What are you saying? You're kicking us out? This house belongs to my son. What right do you have? Are you insane?" I smirked. "This house is titled to both of us, but 90% of the money for its purchase came from my parents. David contributed only a small portion, which was covered by the mortgage that I am now paying. David left me for another woman, taking all of our savings. I am under no obligation to support and serve the parents of a husband while he's off having fun with someone else." George jumped to his feet, pointing a trembling finger at me. You're a liar. Our David went to Germany to bring honor to our family, and you unfaithful wife, are trying to steal your husband's home. I'm calling David. He'll deal with you." I calmly took out my phone, opened the photo of David and Tiffany in Miami, and held it up to their faces. "Look closely. Is this your son's Germany? This is Miami, and this girl is his mistress." He lied about the business trip to take his mistress to a resort, spending millions, while leaving his wife at home to care for his parents. How do you like that? Patricia snatched the phone. Her eyes were glued to the picture. She instantly recognized her son and the young beauty beside him. Her face changed, from red to a deathly pale, but the instinct of blind protection for her son took over. She threw the phone back at me and screamed, "It's photoshopped. That has to be photoshopped. You made it all up out of jealousy. My son is a good, decent man. He would never do something like that, and even if he went on a little vacation. So what? A man is allowed to have a few women. It's your own fault for not keeping your husband, and now you have the nerve to kick his parents out." I shook my head with pity. Even now, they were justifying his actions. My patience had run out. Think whatever you want. The truth is the truth. I have filed for divorce. The court has already frozen David's assets. And as for this apartment, I am a legal owner. I'm giving you 3 days. If you have not left by the end of that period, I will call building management and a marshal to have your belongings removed. Don't say I didn't warn you." With that, I turned and went into my bedroom, locking the door. Behind me, I could hear Patricia's screams and curses, and the sound of George banging furniture. They called David endlessly. I could hear Patricia yelling into the phone, "Son, pick up. Your wife is throwing us out on the street," but the only response was the silence of an unavailable number. Or perhaps David was just too busy with his mistress to answer. That night, I lay awake listening to their lamentations, but there wasn't a shred of doubt in my soul. Kindness misplaced is foolishness. I had been a fool for far too long. It was time to bring order back to my life. And the first step was to evict unworthy people from my home. In 3 days, peace would return to this apartment. It might be empty, but it would be clean. Only later, after everything had settled, did I learn the details of that fateful night in Miami, a night David would surely remember for the rest of his life. That evening, the atmosphere at the 5-star restaurant on the oceanfront of the Emerald Shore Resort was pure romance: candles, flowers, the sound of the waves. David and Tiffany were enjoying a lavish dinner of lobster, Wagyu steak, and expensive red wine. David was in an elegant white linen suit, Tiffany in a stunning evening gown with a pearl necklace. They toasted to their happy future, one in which David would divorce his wife and marry her. When the dinner concluded, the waiter brought the check, $2,500. David smirked smugly, pulled his black Amex from his wallet, and placed it in the folder with a flourish. He turned to Tiffany, whispering sweet promises of a shopping spree for designer handbags the next day. 5 minutes later, the waiter returned, looking flustered. He leaned in and said quietly, "I'm very sorry, sir, but your card was declined. The terminal is giving an error. Would you mind trying another card?" David frowned, embarrassed in front of his date. "There must be a problem with your machine. That card has a 6-figure limit." What could be wrong? "Fine, try this one." David pulled out another card, a Visa Platinum. The waiter left and returned again, shaking his head apologetically. "This one isn't working either, sir. The card has been blocked by the issuing bank." Now David started to sweat. He rummaged through his wallet, pulling out all his cards, debit, credit, 5 in total. All 5 were either declined or returned a message about a temporary block. The smile on Tiffany's face vanished, replaced by suspicion. Other diners began to whisper and glance their way. "A high roller who can't pay for dinner? How embarrassing." The restaurant manager approached. He was still polite, but his tone was firm. "Mr. Miller, our system shows that all of your cards are invalid. We must ask you to settle the bill in cash or with a wire transfer. Furthermore, we've just been informed by the front desk that the credit card you used to guarantee your 7-night stay has also been declined. Your total outstanding balance, including lodging and tonight's dinner, is currently $47,500. If you cannot pay immediately, we will be forced to ask you to leave the resort and will have to involve security." David's face was beet red. With trembling hands, he took out his phone to make a transfer through his banking app. But alas, a cold message appeared on the screen. "Your account has been frozen by court order." At that moment, in my apartment in New York, my phone rang. It was the hotel manager. Since the credit card David used to book the room was an authorized user card on my account, they contacted the primary cardholder in case of a problem. "Hello, is this Elena Miller? We're calling from the Emerald Shore Resort in Miami. Your husband, Mr. Miller, is having some trouble with his payment." I listened to him and then replied calmly, loudly enough so that David, if the manager had him on speakerphone, and I was sure he did, could hear me. "Hello. Yes, I was the one who asked the bank to block the cards. We are in the process of a divorce, and I have filed a complaint with the authorities regarding his concealment of assets. I am not responsible for any of his expenses, or the expenses of his mistress. Please proceed according to the law. If he doesn't pay, call the police and have him arrested." I hung up. On the other end of the line, in Miami, David heard my voice coming from the manager's phone. His face went as white as a sheet. Tiffany, sitting next to him, clearly heard the words divorce and police and jumped up in a panic. "David, what is all this? You told me you were separated and getting divorced soon. Why did she block your cards?" "You lied to me," David stammered, trying to hold on to her. "Tiffany, honey, calm down. It's just my wife being vindictive. I have money, a lot of money. This is just a temporary little problem. Just lend me a little to pay this off. We'll go back tomorrow. I'll pay you back double." Tiffany pulled her arm away and looked at David with contempt. She realized she had come to a resort with a broke con man who was in legal trouble. "Are you crazy? Where would I get that kind of money? You invited me on vacation, and now you want me to pay? You are pathetic." Tiffany grabbed her purse and stormed off to their room to pack, leaving David alone in the middle of the restaurant. under the watchful eyes of the other patrons and the resort's security staff. That night, David did not return to his luxurious villa. He was detained at the front desk to settle his debt. He had to call everyone he knew, trying to borrow money, from friends to colleagues. But everyone avoided him, as Alex and I had preemptively spread a rumor that David had a massive gambling problem and was deep in debt. David was trapped in the very paradise he had created for himself, a bitter end for a traitor. After giving my in-laws their ultimatum and having David's accounts frozen, I spent the evening cleaning out his home office. I wanted to find any important documents related to his assets to prepare for the upcoming legal battle. This office had always been his sacred territory. He constantly cited his busy schedule and need for focus, forbidding me or the cleaning lady from entering. I put on gloves and started with the bottom drawers of his massive oak desk. Stacks of old documents, years-old expense reports, all covered in dust. In the very back corner, I found a small cardboard box. Inside was an old smartphone David had stopped using 2 years ago because of a cracked screen. I remembered him saying the motherboard had fried and he'd thrown it out. But my professional marketing intuition told me, data is gold. I took the phone to the living room and plugged it in. After 15 minutes, the spider-webbed screen lit up. Thankfully, the phone still worked, though the touchscreen was barely responsive. I patiently started trying to guess the password. His birthday, no. Our wedding anniversary, no. His mother's birthday, wrong again. Suddenly, I remembered Tiffany's birthday, which I had seen on the documents. I entered the combination of her day, month, and year of birth. The phone unlocked. My heart sank. So, they had been together 2 years ago, when this phone was still in use. And all this time, I had been living a sweet lie, trusting him completely. I went to the voice recorder app. David had a habit of recording meetings or instructions from his boss. But among the boring work files was one recording titled Future Plan, over 30 minutes long, created 6 months ago. He must have synced data from the cloud or used this old phone for secrecy. I pressed play. David's familiar voice came through, but the tone was completely different. Not the respectable tone he usually used, but loose and calculating. He was talking to another man, clearly a drinking buddy. "Don't worry about it, man. I've got it all figured out," David bragged in the recording. "My idiot wife doesn't have a clue. All she knows is how to work her ass off and stand over a stove. I'll bring my old folks down from PA. Tell her I'm going to Germany for 4 years. Let her take care of them. You know my mom. She's a real piece of work. She'll squeeze every last drop of life out of that daughter-in-law of hers." The other man laughed. "So you're really going to Germany?" David snickered. "Germany? Hell no. I took a vacation, gathered up the cash, and I'm taking my girl Tiffany to a resort. When I get back, I'll find some reason to start a fight and file for divorce. By then, all the assets will be moved. Elena will be left with nothing. I'll use these 4 years to turn her into a free maid, squeeze everything I can out of her, then kick her to the curb. And then I'll officially bring Tiffany into the picture. Got the money, life's a breeze." The recording ended with the clinking of glasses. I sat on the sofa, clutching the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. The initial pain had been replaced by a boundless disgust. I wasn't just a betrayed wife. I was a pawn in his cruel scheme. He thought of me as an idiot, a free maid. He wanted to use me and then discard me. The tears stopped flowing. Hatred had dried them up. I copied the audio file to my computer, sent 1 copy to Michael Sterling, and saved it to 3 different cloud services. This was irrefutable proof of his moral depravity and his conspiracy to commit fraud and conceal assets. With this recording, the court would see our marriage in a very different light. I looked out the window. The summer storm was starting again in New York. The rain lashed furiously against the glass, mirroring the tempest in my soul. "David, you underestimated me. You thought I was a sheep you could lead around, but you forgot that a cornered sheep can knock its enemy off its feet." I turned off the lights in the living room and went to my bedroom with a completely new resolve. Tomorrow would be a long day, and I now held the sharpest weapon to end this charade for good. The next morning, I arrived at my office earlier than usual to prepare for the weekly planning meeting. The workday was in full swing, when a commotion started in the building's lobby. The receptionist called me, her voice trembling with anxiety. "Elena, can you please come down? There's an older woman here, says she's your mother-in-law, and she's causing a huge scene. She has a sign. She's screaming, demanding to see you. Security can't calm her down. She keeps throwing herself on the floor and shouting." I frowned, putting down my documents. Of course, Patricia wasn't going to sit back and do nothing. She had resorted to an old trick, public shaming to humiliate me in front of my colleagues, to make me afraid and drop my legal actions. I straightened my blazer, reapplied my lipstick to look even more confident, and calmly took the elevator down to the ground floor. The elevator doors opened to a scene of chaos. Patricia, wearing a frumpy brown dress with her hair in disarray, was sitting on the floor in the center of the lobby. She was holding a piece of cardboard with a sloppily written message: "Shameless daughter-in-law cheats on husband and throws his parents onto the street." A crowd of employees from various companies had gathered, all filming on their phones. When she saw me, Patricia jumped up and lunged at me, trying to grab my hair, but 2 security guards intercepted her. She began to wail, her shrill voice echoing through the marble lobby. "Good people, look at this executive. Her husband is working his fingers to the bone to support her, and she's here fooling around with other men, and then she throws his poor, sick parents out on the street in the rain. You shameless woman. Give my son his home back." The crowd started whispering. Suspicious glances were thrown my way. In our society, accusations of infidelity and disrespect for one's elders are among the most damning for a woman. Patricia knew this well and was hitting me where it hurt the most: my reputation. I stood motionless, my back straight, showing no fear or embarrassment. I gestured for security to step back, took out my phone, and connected it to a portable speaker my assistant had brought down for me at my request. I switched on the microphone function. My voice boomed, loud and clear, cutting through my mother-in-law's cries. "Esteemed colleagues, and you, Patricia, I am very sorry you've chosen to resolve our family problems this way. You claim I am cheating and throwing you out on the street. Well, let's give everyone present the opportunity to see the evidence and decide for themselves who is the real cheater and who is the fraud." I held up my phone and played yesterday's audio recording. David's loud, clear voice filled the lobby, articulating every word of his plan to deceive his wife, drain their assets, and use his parents as a tool to control me. Then, I projected onto the large digital screen in the lobby, which I had asked the tech team to set up in advance, the photos of David and Tiffany embracing in Miami, along with the bank statements showing the transfer of thousands of dollars to his mistress. The crowd fell silent. Then the whispering resumed, but now it was directed elsewhere. The accusatory stares were now fixed on Patricia. "So, it's her son who's the cheater. My God, what a scumbag husband. Deceives his wife and runs off with his mistress. And look at the old lady. She knows her son is guilty, but still came here to make a scene." Patricia, hearing her son's voice and seeing his photos with another woman on the giant screen, turned as white as a sheet. She froze, the cardboard sign slipping from her hands. All her aggression evaporated, replaced by confusion and a burning shame. She never expected me to be so well prepared and to deliver such a devastating counterattack. I walked up to her and said quietly but firmly, "Leave, Patricia. Don't embarrass yourself any further. Your son is currently a bankrupt in Miami and will soon be facing a judge. You'd be better off going home and packing your things. My offer still stands. In 3 days, I expect you to vacate my apartment." With that, I apologized to everyone for the disturbance and asked security to escort Patricia out. She trudged away under the judgmental gazes of the crowd, hunched over, looking as if she had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Her attempt at public humiliation had failed spectacularly, putting a definitive end to my relationship with my husband's family. Back in my office, I closed the door and gave myself 10 minutes of silence. I needed complete focus for the next step. David's finances were cut off. My mother-in-law was disgraced. It was time to deal with the root of the problem, his mistress, Tiffany. Through Alex's connections, I obtained the phone number of Tiffany's father, who lived in Florida. According to Alex's information, Tiffany's family was respectable. Her father was a retired high school teacher. Her mother sold goods at a local market. Simple, honest people who valued their reputation and were very proud of their daughter who had made it in the big city. They surely had no idea their daughter was a mistress, destroying someone else's family. I sat in my car, windows rolled up for complete privacy. Taking a deep breath, I dialed the number. After the third ring, a man's voice with a distinct southern drawl, sounding kind and simple, answered, "Hello? Who's this?" I made my voice as soft and polite as possible, but maintained a necessary seriousness. "Hello. I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Elena Miller. I'm David Miller's wife. I'm calling about an important matter concerning your daughter, Tiffany." There was a silence on the other end. The father was likely trying to place the name David. Then his voice became more animated. "Oh, David. Tiffany's boyfriend. She's told us all about him. Did something happen? Did they have a fight?" I sighed internally. Just as I expected, Tiffany had lied to her parents. Slowly and clearly, I began to explain. Every word I spoke was a blow to the old man's pride. "I'm afraid you don't know the whole truth. David is my legal husband. We've been married for 7 years and live in New York. Your daughter has been having an affair with my husband, and they are currently on vacation together in Miami." The father's voice trembled. What? What are you saying?" "My Tiffany told us David was single, a big-shot executive, and that he was going to marry her. Are you sure you have the right number?" I remained calm. "No, I'm not mistaken. And Tiffany is pregnant with my husband's child. But I'm not calling you to argue. I'm calling to inform you of something much more urgent. My husband is currently under investigation for fraud and embezzlement. His assets are frozen. He's bankrupt. Tiffany, by being with him, could be implicated as an accomplice if the investigation expands." I paused, letting the information sink in. I could hear his heavy breathing, could hear his wife in the background asking, "Who is it?" and him shushing her. "I know you're a teacher. You have a respectable family. I don't want to air our dirty laundry and embarrass you in front of your neighbors. I'm only hoping you will call Tiffany and convince her to come to her senses before it's too late. David is not the rich man he pretends to be. He could be facing prison time. If Tiffany stays with him, she will ruin her life." There was a long silence on the other end. Then, his trembling, choked voice came through. "Thank you. Thank you for telling me. I didn't raise my daughter like this. I'll call her right now. I'm so sorry. I am so sorry." He hung up. I lowered the phone, feeling a pang of guilt. I didn't want to cause pain to an old man, but it was a necessary measure. I had to cut off all avenues of retreat for David and Tiffany. When her parents learned the truth, they would force her to come home. And when she realized David was not only broke, but also a potential felon, under pressure from her family, there would be no room left for her illicit love affair or the pregnancy. This call was not just a psychological blow to Tiffany, but a way to help her get out of the quagmire before it was too late, even if my motives were driven by self-preservation. The 3 days passed quickly. As I had expected, my in-laws dug in their heels and had no intention of leaving. They were convinced I was just bluffing, that in this country, no daughter-in-law would dare to evict her husband's parents, fearing gossip and accusations of disrespect. But they were mistaken. The Elena I used to be had died the day David got on that plane. On the morning of the 4th day, I took time off from work. I did not arrive alone. I came with a city marshal, a process server, and 2 representatives from the building's management company. We stood outside my apartment door. I rang the doorbell. Silence, though I could hear the sound of the TV inside. I rang again, then held my keycard to the lock, but the door was deadbolted from the inside. From behind the door, George's defiant voice called out, "Don't even try. I changed the locks. Let's see you kick us out now. My son bought this home. I have a right to live here." I nodded to the marshal. He turned on a body camera to record the proceedings. I spoke loudly but calmly towards the door. "Dad, I gave you 3 days, but you refused to cooperate. This apartment is co-owned by David and me. In his absence, I am the only legal owner present. Your unlawful occupation of the premises and changing the locks is a violation of the law. Today, I have brought a marshal and building management to formally reclaim my residence. If you do not open the door, I will be forced to have a locksmith drill the lock, and security will enter to carry out a forcible eviction. Silence from inside. I gave the signal to the locksmith. The whine of a drill filled the hallway. 5 minutes later, the lock was breached. In the living room, huddled together on the sofa, sat George and Patricia. Their faces were white with terror as the uniformed men entered the apartment. They started to scream, but stopped when they saw the camera pointed at them and the stern faces of the security personnel. I pointed to a stack of cardboard boxes I had prepared. I have hired a moving company. They will help you pack your personal belongings. Please, take only your clothes and personal items. Any property belonging to the apartment, the television, the refrigerator, decorative items will remain here. All your actions are being recorded. The movers worked quickly. Clothes, medications, knickknacks, everything was swiftly packed into boxes. Patricia sobbed and cursed me, calling me a heartless, evil daughter-in-law. I let it all wash over me, standing with my arms crossed, observing the process. When the last box was sealed, I handed George an envelope and a piece of paper with an address. Dad, Mom, despite your attitude towards me, I will show you one final courtesy. This is the address of an inexpensive motel, about a mile from here. I have paid for a room for 1 week. You can stay there until David returns, or until you decide to go back to Pennsylvania. And this is $500 in cash for food. From this moment on, I am absolved of all responsibility for your care in this apartment. George, trembling with rage, snatched the envelope and stuffed it in his pocket. He shot me one last hateful glare and dragged Patricia out behind him. You'll pay for this, you snake. I watched their backs disappear down the hall and felt an immense sense of relief. I had the locksmith change all the locks to a state-of-the-art system, with fingerprint access and erase all old data. The beep of the new lock sounded like a bell, heralding the beginning of a new chapter in my life. The apartment was empty, but it felt clean and safe. I had reclaimed my territory. While I was setting things right in New York, David was experiencing the worst hours of his life in Miami. After being kicked out of the hotel and abandoned by Tiffany, he was left stranded with only a couple $100 in his pocket and a wallet full of useless plastic. He tried calling Tiffany, but her phone was off. He called his parents and learned they had just been evicted and were sitting in a seedy motel. David realized he had lost everything. He had to get back to New York. But how? He had bought the business class ticket to Miami on a credit card that was now worthless. He made his way to a pawn shop. He took off his Rolex Submariner, the one he had bought for over $40,000, his pride and joy. How much for this? It's authentic, almost new. The pawnbroker, after examining the watch under a loupe, chuckled. The watch is real, but you've got no box, no papers. For something like this, I can only give you what I'd give for a stolen one. $5,000. Cash. Right now. David was stunned. Are you kidding me? I paid over 40 grand for this. The papers are in New York. Give me at least 20. The pawnbroker waved his hand dismissively. No papers, no provenance. 5 grand. That's my final offer. Hungry, broke, and desperate, David gritted his teeth and agreed. Holding the wad of cash, he felt a bitter sting. Just a few days ago, that amount was the cost of a single dinner for him. Now, it was his only salvation. He bought a ticket in the last row of economy class. The flight was delayed for 3 hours. He sat in the waiting area, watching happy couples, his heart aching. He remembered how proudly he had walked out of this same airport a few days ago and looked at himself now unshaven, in wrinkled clothes. On the plane, he was squeezed between 2 large men. Children were screaming. Instead of steak and wine, he was given a dry sandwich and a bottle of water. The plane landed at JFK in a downpour. He caught a beat-up taxi into the city. New York seemed gray and cold. He knew the real storm wasn't outside the window, but waiting for him at home, in the apartment where he was once the king. The journey from paradise to the hell he deserved was over. The taxi dropped David off in a dark side street somewhere in a rough neighborhood. He stood in front of the address I had left for his parents, the Cozy Inn, a rundown building with a noisy dive bar on the ground floor. He walked inside. A musty smell hit him. He asked the proprietor where he could find George and Patricia Miller. She gave him a disdainful look and jerked her head towards the third floor. Climbing the dark staircase, he heard his mother's sobs. He pushed the door open. A tiny room, 150 square feet, with an old bed and a plastic wardrobe. His father was smoking in the corner. His mother was crying, facing the wall. Seeing her son, Patricia jumped up and ran to him. "David, you're back. Look what your wife did to us. She threw us out onto the street, into this dump. You have to teach her a lesson. Get our home back." David pushed his mother away and sat on the edge of the bed. He looked at the squalid room, at his aged parents. Rage, shame, and powerlessness washed over him. George asked venomously, "So how was Germany? Your wife is causing a rebellion back home. She says you were in Miami with some girl," showed everyone pictures. "Is it true?" David lowered his head. His silence was the answer. Patricia froze. "So, it's true. You lied to all of us?" David exploded. "Yes, it's true. I had it all planned out, but I never expected Elena to be such a bitch." She froze everything, went to the authorities. "I'm broke." George, in a fury, threw down his cigarette. "You're a fool, son. You had a good wife, a home, and you traded it all for some tramp. Now you have no home, no money, and no honor." At that moment, David's phone buzzed. It was an email from HR. He opened it. The subject line read, "Notice of termination and demand for restitution." The letter stated that the company had received proof of his vacation fraud and had also discovered that over the past 2 years, he had embezzled $150,000 by falsifying expense reports. The company demanded repayment within 15 days, or the matter would be turned over to the police. The phone slipped from his hands. He sat there, stunned. This was the end. Not just his wife, home, and money, but now his career and the threat of prison. "I've been fired," he whispered. "They want $150,000. Elena. It was all Elena. She wants to destroy me." Hearing the word prison, Patricia fainted. Chaos erupted in the cramped room. David sat in the corner, curled into a ball. For the first time in his life, he felt a true, chilling fear for his future. A week later, Tiffany called me. She begged for a meeting. I agreed. She came to the cafe looking haggard and pale, nothing like the glamorous girl in the photos. She placed a bag of money on the table. "Here's 100,000. It's the last of the money he transferred to me. I spent the rest. Please, take it. My parents said they wouldn't let me back in the house until I returned everything to you." She showed me a medical document, and I had an abortion. I can't have a child with a man like that. He deceived me. He deceived you. I was so stupid. I felt sorry for her. She was a victim too. I took the money. I will deduct this from his debt. As for your choice, that is your decision. Just remember, you can't build your happiness on someone else's sorrow. She burst into tears. I left, leaving her alone with her remorse. A month later, on a rainy evening, David ambushed me outside my office. He looked like a homeless person, soaking wet and unshaven. He fell to his knees in a puddle in front of me. "Elena, I'm sorry. I was wrong. It was all Tiffany. She bewitched me. I've lost everything. Please, forgive me, take me back. Give me a chance." I looked down at him with contempt. "Get up. Don't humiliate yourself. This was your choice." Tiffany returned the money to me. She has more of a conscience than you do. Hearing about the money, his eyes lit up with greed. "So, you have money? Help me pay back the company." I shook my head and walked away. "Figure it out yourself. I'll see you in court." I got into my warm, dry car and drove off, leaving him sobbing in the rain. On the day of the court hearing, I was calm and confident. David sat alone, dejected, without a lawyer. He tried to mumble something about bad investments, but my evidence, the bank statements, and most importantly, that audio recording left him no chance. The judge delivered the verdict. The divorce was granted. The apartment and the car were my sole property, as the origin of the funds was proven. David was ordered to repay the remaining $200,000 He had siphoned from our joint finances. I walked out of the courtroom a victor. I was free. 2 years later, I'm sitting in a sky bar on the roof of a skyscraper in Chicago, sipping wine and looking out at the city lights. After the divorce, I sold that apartment, moved to Chicago, and became the regional director for a large international company. I built a brilliant career, became even more beautiful and confident. A text comes in from Alex. "Elena, guess who I just saw?" Ordered an Uber, and the driver was David. He sent a photo. Behind the wheel sat a thin man with a weathered face, wearing a rideshare service uniform. "He looks terrible," Alex wrote. "He recognized me, got all embarrassed, was silent the whole ride. They say he's still living in a rented room, working like a dog to pay off his debts. His parents went back to Pennsylvania. His mom had a stroke and is bedridden, and his dad drinks. Karma." I looked at the photo without any emotion. It was the price of his choices. I put my phone down. An elegant man, Andrew, my business partner, who had been persistently pursuing me for the last 6 months, sat down beside me. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly, placing a glass in front of me. I smiled. "About the past. But it's in the past now." He raised his glass. "To our brilliant future." We clinked our glasses. The sound was cheerful. To a new, free, and happy life. The story of my old marriage was over, leaving behind the clean blank pages of a new book, one where I was the author. The story ends here. Thank you all for your attention.